Welcome to this week's roundup of the top stories in tech. You won't be surprised when I say that generative AI continues to dominate the news, my reader comments, and my inbox alike. Now, it's clear that you, my readers, my listeners, want more on AI, and that's understandable. Although I'm constantly reminding people that there is a ton of stuff, other interesting stuff going on in emerging technologies that you shouldn't lose sight of. And I'll cover a bit of that later on. Now, having said all that, the main stories this week are all about AI. To start, the big announcement of the week was the launch of Meta's latest version of its AI large language model called Llama 2. Now, Meta have been relatively quiet compared to OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, and Anthropic, but I'm keeping a close eye on Meta's AI ambitions. They're a bit of a dark horse and shouldn't be ignored. Now, talking to Google, they're pitching an AI tool to generate news for media organizations. Sounds obvious, but also troubling and fraught with dangers given AI's proclivity to make stuff up and pass it off as true. Now, the other news that caught my eye was a research paper from Stanford that suggests Chat GPT is getting dumber. I would argue that it is already dumb, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. Now, there is a scientific explanation for this phenomenon. It's just that nobody seems able to explain it, but I'll do my best. My members column this week for the Wiser Plus members is about threads and Twitter. Now, it's not a subject that I'm going to devote a lot of time to, but I do think Meta's cut and paste job on Twitter is a big deal. It won't see Twitter off, but it's going to be hard for advertisers to resist the pull of Meta, who have the most effective advertising platform on social media. And without advertisers, Twitter can't run itself. It's barely breathing as it is. Anyway, just for yourself, if you agree or not with my 5 reasons why Threads will beat Twitter, you can see the link in the show notes, although it is behind a paywall for the next week before I open it up to general public. Now, the first story up this week is about Meta. So earlier in the week, Zuckerberg announced Llama 2. The new version, which was trained on 40% more data than the previous version, has about 2 trillion words in it. And the previous version did not have a chatbot. It was simply an open source model that could be used through other means. But Llama 2 now has a chatbot in front of it. And the thing that sets Meta's foundational AI model apart from the others is that it is open source. This means that you can download the large language model and run it yourself if you had the technical wherewithal to do that. But there's simply no need to do that unless you want to, because you can head over to llama.perplexity.ai and you can use Meta's AI chatbot for free, which I have been doing. Now, here's the thing. Meta has a significant AI capability. It also has data and lots of it. And at the same time as there's news coming out that it's stopping development of Quest 2 and moving over to a more mixed reality headset, Zuckerberg is turning Meta into a genuine tech company. So it's not just Facebook anymore, social media with Facebook and Instagram. You've also got the whole platform development around mixed reality. Some might call it the metaverse. And I think you're increasingly going to see Meta be a big player in the artificial intelligence space. And Zuckerberg's plans for AI go broader than just building it publicly for large language models to do research and to play around with, because Meta plans to integrate generative AI into Facebook and Instagram. And just a couple of months ago, Zuckerberg announced that they're developing technologies such as AI agents with different personalities and a text prompt feature for modifying photos in Instagram stories. But I should just say, AI has not always gone well for Meta. Last November, just before the arrival of Chat GPT, they launched Galactica, a research AI that was supposed to revolutionize academic research. Well, that didn't go so well. And within 3 days, Galactica was pulled because it was passing off fake, false, and biased content as the real deal. For the second story, the question I'm going to ask you is, if you're a Chat GPT user, are you finding that it's actually getting worse? Well, according to this new Stanford research paper about GPT that I came across earlier this week, the researchers suggest that the number one AI chatbot is actually, in their words, getting dumber. The research compared both versions, the GPT and the Chat GPT Plus, the free and the paid versions, against research that they did about 3 or 4 months ago. And they found that, and in their words, we find that the performance and behavior of both GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 vary significantly across these 2 releases. and that their performance on some tasks have gotten substantially worse over time. Now, here's the thing. My experience of these large language models is that they are both inconsistent and incapable when performing simple tasks. This is counterintuitive because the big selling point of AI is that it's great for automating repetitive and low value tasks. But just simply ask it to write 10 sentences that end in the word apple, or to solve the puzzle of if it takes 5 hours to dry 5 pieces of clothes, how long will it take to dry 30 pieces of clothes? And you will find that every AI model, with probably the exception of Chat GPT Plus, will just give you the wrong answers. And that's because there are heads full of knowledge and information, but they have no wisdom or what you might call common sense. And so all of them have this very sort of frustrating habit behavior of misinterpreting the prompt. You ask it to do something and you just don't get the answer back. They do their own thing and then they tell you that they've followed your prompt to the letter, even when they clearly haven't. You know, the amount of times I've said, write not 10 bullets, and they've given me 9 or 11. And I say, how many have you given me? And they say, we've given you 10. It's clearly just not the case. Now, this can be partly explained by poor prompting on behalf of the user, which is, let's be honest, it's both an art and a science that takes some mastering. That's why I wrote the book, The Beginner's Guide to Chat GPT. But the point is that these tools are still in their formative stages, and many of the companies that are developing them, the engineers in those firms, simply don't know how they're behaving. They don't know how they're giving the answers that they're giving. All of these AI models are inherently unpredictable, which is sort of the concern around safety, but also why they're now building safety nets in. So you have like the Anthropic constitutional AI type model, where actually they're not letting these machine learning algorithms let loose to do their own thing. Now, my take on this report from Stanford is that far from saying GPT-4 has gotten worse, I'd say that these researchers are actually looking at the wrong thing, and they're seeing the inconsistency and unpredictability of large language models. And my bet is that when they repeat their test in another 3 months, they'll arrive at a different conclusion again. Now, I did find a more technical explanation, which I didn't really understand, of how these large language models can behave inconsistently. And it's through a concept known as SHARCS, which stands for Shared Concept Space. There's a link in the show notes if you want to read all of the technical details, but you have been warned. Now, my third story this week was around Google. And according to the New York Times, Google is pitching an AI tool called Genesis. And the point of Genesis is that it can write news articles based on current events with no human involvement. Now, despite the evidence of AI's inability to know when it's made stuff up, and the point, news organizations like The Times, NPR, and Insider have already told staff that they're looking at ways to use AI. Now, however, some have already embraced it. So CNET, BuzzFeed, and Gizmodo have all started publishing AI-generated articles, and they have all got themselves into hot water for publishing AI-generated content that was factually incorrect. Here's the thing. The adoption of generative AI into the media sector is obvious and inevitable. There's no escaping the concerns about AI-generated misinformation across all sectors, especially media, an industry that has some tough decisions to make about AI. On the one hand, you have the appeal of the nearly free cost of AI-generated content in a sector that's frankly tough to make money and highly competitive for attention. And on the other, the continued erosion of trust in news organizations, which is pushing audiences to get their information elsewhere. For example, new figures from Ofcom this week showed that TikTok is the number one source of news for teenagers. Now, one thing is for sure, the volume of AI-generated misinformation and false news flooding social media will significantly rise. Last week, I talked about the deepfake video with Martin Lewis. Well, that's the point there, is it's just cheap and easy to create and near impossible to police. You can't, despite what all these AI checkers tell you, it's impossible to run a tool that's going to know whether the output has been generated by AI. It needs human intuition to sort of spot when things are just not correct. And a lot of the misinformation you're going to find is going to be very subtle. It's not going to be obvious. Now, knowing the difference between credible news sources and the rest is going to become increasingly important for all of us. Now, do you want to get ahead of the game in generative AI, but don't know where to start? Don't worry, you're not alone. It's the number one question I get asked all the time. What do I do? How do I start? It's scary. Well, it doesn't need to be. That's why I've written the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Chat GPT. It's only €4.99, and it's packed with information, example prompts, and explanations of how to make Chat GPT work for you the way you want it to work. Talking of AI tools, check this one out as a cheaper alternative to ChatGPT Plus if you're interested in Code Interpreter. Now, this has come from a company called Humata. I think I pronounced that correctly. And the app calls itself the ChatGPT for your files. Humata is an AI-powered software tool that can quickly summarize, synthesize, that's their word, and extract valuable data from files. It can generate new writing and data analysis based on your files and create detailed insights for reports, papers, and other tasks. You can even ask Humata as a chatbot to ask questions about your data and get instant answers powered by the AI. You can try it for yourself, and again, there is a link in the notes. And finally, other headlines that are in this week's newsletter, which you can find at rickhuckstep.com. Credit Suisse has collaborated with the Swiss Football Association to create 756 NFTs featuring members of the women's national football team on the eve of the World Cup. As part of its 96th birthday celebration, 7-Eleven has released Slurpee NFT collectibles, another way of engaging with their customers and building customer loyalty using emerging technologies like NFTs. The Bank of America is using virtual reality and the metaverse to train new employees. Fashion brand Lacoste has launched The Mission. This is a interactive digital experience using dynamic NFTs to engage fans in community quests and earn rewards. Bootmaker Timberland is celebrating its 50th anniversary with an augmented reality experience that allows customers to customize their original Timberland boot. Google's Bard has gone multimodal and can now read pictures. Apple GPT is on its way. Microsoft is to charge $30 a month for its generative AI features in Copilot, but then it is aimed at corporates. There's a new US bill which wants to regulate DeFi, decentralized finance, which is the Web3 banking space, and they want to regulate it like a bank. Russia has banned government use of iPhones because there is a report that they say the US is spying on them using Apple's iPhone iOS operating system. Don't know about whether that's true or not. And finally, I found out that Bill Gates is a fan of pie, just like me. And that made me feel good. Anyway, that's all for this week. Thanks for being here. And remember to hit the like button if you enjoyed this show. Leave me a comment and let me know about any of the things that I've talked about today. Also, you can check the show notes for all of today's links. Till next week. And remember, insight and information gives you leverage. Have a great day.